strong financial disciplines for national retailers. Mary Lynn has served as the Chief Financial Officer for several fashion and luxury brands, including Stuart Weitzman, Talbots, and Coach's North America division. She has also held a variety of roles within finance at Eileen Fisher, L Brands, and Federated Department Stores. Mary Lynn began her career as a senior auditor at Ernst & Young and is a graduate of Miami University, where she received her BS in accounting. She currently splits her time between New York City and Boston. She is passionate about supporting young women and has served as a mentor and volunteer for organizations including her alma mater and local community programs. And I will say I met Mary Lynn at a Financial Women's Association event about 10 years ago, and it's just been a pleasure to know her ever since. So with that, welcome Mary Lynn Phillips.
Thank you, Susan.
You're quite
It's
welcome.
nice to be here. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's get into the conversation. Take us back to those earlier days in your career. How did you decide to get into accounting and finance and get into retail initially?
Yes. So I actually always knew I was going to be in finance or in business. It's something that has, really interested me for as long as I can remember, and I'm probably largely attributed to my father, who was in business, was in finance, and he was a very strong role model for me. He's actually the one who pushed me into the position of majoring in accounting. When you first, when you're young and you think the world is open to you and you think you can do a whole lot of different things. I remember my father giving me the sage advice, which is if you're going to when you graduate from college, you need to have a skill. And so graduate with an accounting degree. And if you have an accounting degree, you will always have a job. Number one, he was my role model. Number two, he was paying for college. And so I ended up majoring in accounting. But what I found is that accounting is the language of business, and it certainly provided me with an ability to do and to experience and to get exposure to lots of different things. As you mentioned, I started my career at Ernst & Young, and I think as a young finance accounting professional working in that big 8 environment provided me with a tremendous amount of exposure to CEOs and CFOs, business leaders at a very young age. And so you very quickly learn how to carry yourself, how to communicate, and be able to articulate your point of view very, very quickly and very easily. So I leveraged the people that I knew and met within my public accounting career and networked and ended up in retail. I actually did not specialize in retail when I was in public accounting. I specialized in healthcare and insurance, but through networking ended up in retail. And when I joined L Brands, I was immediately hooked on retail. It's a very fast-paced environment. There's a very performance-driven environment, and I found that was something that I was very much drawn to. And so, as they say, the cards were written, and I ended up staying in retail for the rest of my professional career. The other thing I would say is that in retail I had the opportunity to have exposure to some really tremendous female leaders. Not very many female leaders in finance, but I was able to gain that experience and that exposure to what a successful woman leader looks like, how she carries herself, how she commands respect in a male-dominated world, and those were very important lessons for me as a young, impressionable professional.
Thanks for sharing that, Mary Lynn. One of the things I forgot to do at the beginning was to find out who's in the room. So I think this is a good time to just pause a moment and to find out what role you play in your organization. So if you could go ahead and answer that question. And Stephanie, I don't know if you could put the results of the poll up. Okay, so about a quarter of the people are principals, quarter other, 28% EVP, SVP, or VP, and it was 17% CFO. Thank you so much. All right. So Mary Lynn, tell us about that transition now from fashion retail to now grocery. How did that all come about, and what are some of the differences that you've noticed?
Yeah, well, many people think that I have perfect future vision, having jumped from retail in late 2019 into food pre-pandemic. I'd like to say that I had the power of 2020 vision, but it literally, I mean, no pun intended. But in actuality, it was a little bit by accident and a little bit, I would say, of luck. I left Stuart Weitzman in early 2019. And really, spent some time trying to think what it was that I wanted to do. And Susan and I have had a lot of conversation around balance and the importance of knowing when you are out of balance. And when I left Stuart Weitzman, I was out of balance. I had worked a lot of hours. I did a lot of traveling to and from China. And to say I was burned out was probably an understatement. And so I took some time off, spent that time really trying to figure out what it was that was important to me. What were the values that I held for myself, and what were the values that I wanted in the company that I joined. And it was really through that exploration that I found Stop and Shop. And it enabled me to work in an industry that I loved, which is retail, but also learn something new, which is food. And what I learned very quickly after making that transition is that retail is retail. It doesn't matter if you're selling luxury goods or if you're selling produce. It's all about making sure that you're providing the customer with the best experience, the best value, and finding ways to build that loyalty so that you can sustain long-term growth. I tell people that when I joined food retail, what I realized was about 80% of my past retail life was completely transferable, and about 20% was new. And that new really had to do with, like I said, selling produce versus selling luxury goods. The inventory is perishable. So I am looking at inventory in terms of days on hand as opposed to weeks on hand. I'm looking at a production cycle, which is based upon the growing season as opposed to the design cycle. But otherwise, the pure fundamentals of the business are very much the same.
And you've mentioned strong female leaders and as role models for you. Can you talk further about mentors and sponsors that you've had along the way and the importance of that? I know that's something that you promote as a mentor yourself.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I had the opportunity in retail, and especially fashion retail, to work among very strong female leaders who, as I said, provided a tremendous example for me in terms of what success could look like for me. But interestingly, in the world of finance, I could probably count on one hand the number of female leaders I've had in my career on the finance side. And so, most of my mentors when I was young in my career were men. For me, it was important to have the representation so that I could envision what a female leader looked like. But in terms of connecting with and finding support within the organization to further my career, I really relied on my male leadership. And I can speak to one in particular who was very influential for me. Number one, understanding that I was eager and that I was ambitious to learn. And so he gave me the opportunity to move around in my career. So while I was at L Brands, about every 2 years, he was providing me with new exposures and new experiences within finance. And so I very quickly learned the back of the house of a retail organization in terms of how and all the ways that the accounting and finance team supports the organization. It was really after several years that I went to him and I said, listen, I know that I can do accounting and finance, but if I really want to be a leader within retail, I need to understand the product side of the business. And he helped to open those doors. And so he provided me with the opportunity to take a job as a merchant and in merchant planning, opened the door so that I had a job opportunity in real estate and retail operations. And so it was really through him and his, number one, his willingness to see my potential and to help my ambition. And in giving me those different experiences and exposures and opportunities to really grow and develop. And I really owe a lot of where I am today to the opportunities that he provided for me and enabled me to put those tools in my toolbox so that when I stand here today as the CFO of a retail company, I have the ability to relate to all areas of the business. I understand what their particular issues are and their pain points so that I can build the support organization around them in order to help them and to help achieve our strategic initiatives.
Absolutely. That exposure and visibility and access is so important. So I'm going to ask you, how have you found your journey as a female leader in finance, and how do we inspire other women to enter and to stay in finance?
Yeah. And, it's interesting when you and I were talking, Susan, about, getting women in finance and then staying in finance. I think staying in any job is it's about loving what you do, right? And I think giving people number one, showing people what it looks like to be successful in finance as a woman, explaining my path to women, especially young women who are thinking about a role in finance, and really challenging them to understand the different industries and the different opportunities that are out there, because if they like the industry, then they're going to love being a finance person in that industry. And so it's not just about being a finance person. It's about really finding the place that you enjoy, that you excel at, that you find you have passion around, and then being able to apply your skills in that industry. I spend a lot of time with my alma mater. I am an alumni mentor to undergraduate students, both men and women. And that's really the message that I give them is, find the industry that you're passionate about, and then apply your skill set there. And it may take many trials to find that industry that you're passionate about. But that's my my challenge and the advice that I give to young people that I interact with.
Thanks for that. We have a question in the chat from Tom Ambry. He asked, are there any programs, or what types of programs does Stop and Shop have to attract women to finance and keep them engaged and developed?
Yeah, there's a mentorship program that's a little bit in its infancy, I would say. I'm excited to try to further that along. There are lots of development programs specifically for women. Stop and Shop has a relationship with a program called New, and we do send a lot of our strong women talent through that program for leadership development and ongoing skill development. We also have a women's associate resource group where we work with women within the organization. We work to try to identify and make sure everyone knows that the women in our organization know what resources are available to them, know what jobs are available to them. And we also look for ways to give back to the women in our communities as well. There's the grocery business is, I think, historically a very male-dominated business. So there is quite an extra effort being made to try to draw more women into this role, into this industry.
Yes. Thank you. We have another question, sort of a follow-up question from Tom's, from Marjorie Spitz, and she asked, what are the challenges you're seeing today compared to when you were first starting out? She asked, has there been progress? What are your thoughts?
That's a really good question. I think, and I've been mentoring young women in the field for several years, and I would say that the questions are really largely the same. They really haven't changed that much over the years that I've been working with and talking with young women coming into this field, and it's largely around balance. And it's how do you juggle family and career, and that's a struggle I think many women are faced with every day, and I know it has been largely discussed in the public forum around, especially with COVID and the impact that this pandemic is having on women and their ability to stay in the workforce. And it is a tragedy that we need to figure out, and we need to figure out a better solution than we have today. As I mentioned just earlier about the Women's ARG group, it's why we are focusing on making sure that women in our industry know what resources are available to them, because there are a tremendous amount of resources, whether it's employee assistant programs or assistance to find childcare, assistance to find elder care. I think organizations and the affiliations that organizations have with other assistance programs are important, so that associates know that they have outlets or places to go to get help. When I'm asked that question around balance, it's a tough one, and because number one, I think balance, your balance changes so much. Your work-life balance changes so much as you go through your career. The things that are pulling on you early in your career, mid-career, and at the end of your career are so different. And I also think work-life balance means something different to every person. And so it's important to find the organizations, the leaders, the peer groups that understand where you are in your struggle with balance, and how they can help you.
Absolutely. It's the resources that are so important, and having your support network, very, very key. So one of the questions that Robert DeValue had is relative to work-life balance. During COVID, has Stop and Shop been able to retain women talent?
Right now we're trying to retain all talent. Being a frontline worker, it has definitely posed its challenges, right? But in terms of specifically the retention of women, it is always a priority, whether it's COVID or non-COVID.
Yes, yes. And then we had a question about alignment of Stop and Shop with the European parent in terms of organizational cultures. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is my first opportunity to work with a European company. I would say, largely the culture of this company is consistent from the European arm and the U.S. arm. There is definitely and I don't know that this is unique because it's a European business, but it certainly was a factor that I was looking for when I was trying to decide which organization I was going to join. There's an emphasis on giving back to your communities. That it's because of the communities that we're successful, and so we need to give back to those communities that we serve. And it's important to be a part of those communities. So we do a lot of work around food banks and supporting schools and local organizations. Each region of Stop and Shop has specific charitable organizations that they support that are important to those communities. And the other value that comes from European parent all the way down is the focus on sustainability and health. Again, we're a food organization, so probably not a stretch that health is a priority for us. But the sustainability piece has been increasingly interesting for me. It's I've worked for companies who have talked about being sustainable, but they really haven't lived those values. And this organization, it is part of our incentive goals. It is part of our everyday conversation around what are we doing about food waste, what are we doing about plastics, and how are we promoting health within the communities that we support. And so those are, like I said, those are just part of the organizational culture that are present in all of the brands under the Ahold Delhaize umbrella.
Thank you for sharing that. And that was such a good question and an interesting one to see how the culture gets promoted throughout the world. Had a question here from Vincent DeVito, who asked, as you progress in your career, it might be more challenging to stay current technically. How do you manage to stay on top of technical accounting issues and stay current and relevant?
Yes, well, on the technical side on the accounting, I rely on my business partners for that. I would be the first to say I am not a technical CFO. I'm much more of an operational CFO, and I rely on my very strong controller partners to stay very current on the technical side. But in terms of operationally, there are an equal amount of new and exciting things that are happening within the industry. And so, I think it's important at all levels of the organization to stay current of what's happening in your industry so that you, understand where the opportunities are as well as where the risks are. And I think in the role of a CFO, that is, my biggest role that I play, right, is being able to look down the street and around the corner in terms of where might we have risks and or opportunities that we need to be aware of and take into consideration in our long-term planning. And in terms of where I find that information, I try to read as much as I can. I'm not always the best at it, I will admit, but I try to read as much as I can.
So that brings me to a question that you and I had previously talked about in terms of, how has the role of the CFO changed over time? Yeah,
I do think it's changed, and I hear this not only from my own experience, as I've interviewed for new roles, but I have friends and network partners in the recruiting space, and I belong to several CFO type roundtable organizations, and I do see that the role of the CFO has changed quite significantly, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, but really concentrated over the last 10 years, moving out of the technical bookkeeping scorekeeper kind of role, and much more into an operational role, more of a business partner, decision support, and really focus more on the future vision, being able to forecast forward, as opposed to just focusing on reporting backwards. It's actually a part and a role that I enjoy quite a bit. Creating that partnership within the business, I think, is it's much more exciting to be a part of creating the future than just reporting on the history. But I also want to underscore, though, that your history is important, because that's where you learn your lessons. So.
Yes. So that takes us to shortly after you're joining Stop and Shop, you're leading in a crisis in the pandemic. Can you talk to what lessons you've learned and what adjustments Stop and Shop has made in response to the pandemic?
Yeah. I think many companies, and I noticed in the poll, many of you are either principals or leaders of your organization. So I know everyone has some semblance of a crisis plan or a disaster recovery plan, right? It's just good business to have that, and Stop and Shop did have the outline of a disaster recovery plan. Unfortunately, in 2019, they had a work stoppage, which also tested their disaster recovery plan or their crisis plan. So, fortunately, right, we had a crisis plan developed, and we had recently used it. But I don't think anyone was really fully prepared for COVID, not only in the length of the crisis, but also in just the severity of the crisis. So, but again, because there was that framework, we were able to quickly identify what are the key processes, the critical processes, the critical communications that we needed to enact in order to stay connected as a leadership team and be able to make the decisions quickly that needed to get made in order to react and respond to what was happening. So I think that was all very positive. But unlike any place I've ever worked, all of a sudden, you go from I'm a very hands-on leader. I lead by walking around and talking to people and interacting with people, and all of a sudden that's gone. And I now have to communicate and interact and motivate people through a screen, which was very different in terms of just adapting my own personal style. And taking advantage of technology that honest, the month before COVID started, we started rolling out Teams, and thank goodness we had started rolling out Teams, because it became the lifeblood of how how we did business and how we communicated with our organization. And working and leading remotely, it looks different, it feels different. I know all of you are engaged in some version of it, and so I listened to my team. I tried to understand what it is that they needed. We erred on the side of over communicating, so we have a daily touch base so that we stay in so we've got that communication line open. And then we also made sure that we left some room for fun. So every Friday we have an open happy hour within the finance team, so that we have a place where we can just kind of let go and tell jokes and be silly and just kind of have a little bit of fun in order to to break up the work week. And for many of my teammates, they look forward to that Friday happy hour, because it signifies the end of the week, and they can close their laptops, right, and do their fun, the family things and their personal things. So I think creating those boundaries and like I said, making sure that we had a lot of open dialogue was so critical in terms of changing my leadership style and being effective and promoting productivity and mental health through the pandemic. But in terms of the business, we saw a lot of changes with COVID. Number one, you can be sure that every time that there was a news article about meat shortages or all you had to do was watch CNN and you knew what was going to sell in the grocery store the next day. It was really quite remarkable in terms of how people reacted and responded to the news that was being fed to them. And so making sure our supply chain was solid was critical. We were fortunate to have very strong partnerships within our supply chain in order to keep product flowing, and there are still places where that supply chain is recovering, and will forever be changed as a result of what happened through COVID. The other thing is that the way that customers choose to shop changed. When we pre-COVID, our digital business, our e-commerce business was low single digits in terms of penetration to our total, and now we're at high single digits in terms of penetration to our total. So fortunately we had an e-commerce infrastructure that we were able to very quickly accelerate in order to accommodate the change in demand. But we had an e-commerce strategy that got us to a growth over the next several years, and we achieved that long-term strategy in a year. So it was rather quite remarkable in terms of seeing the adaptability of our customer and the willingness for them to change their behavior quickly as a result of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Lots of change in a short amount of time, and amazing that you had plans in place. You happened to implement Microsoft Teams, which was fortuitous timing. So very exciting. There's some questions that have come in over the chat around what do you see, if you could share any insights into the future um, in the retail landscape? What are you seeing? I mean, obviously the continuance on, I would think, of growth of e-commerce, but what else would you say that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think, listen, what I have experienced so far is that um, COVID accelerated a lot of things, right? So, and especially around technology. The way that we're gathering today, as an example, I think we're going to see a lot more of virtual meetings. So for businesses in general, not just retail, but I think you're going to see a lot less of travel. You're going to have a lot more virtual meetings and virtual gatherings in place of large T&E budgets, as an example. And I think technology will also continue to be a really large, important part of retail. It was already headed that way, and in some sectors of retail, it was already heavily penetrated. But I think you're going to start to see a heavier penetration across all areas of retail on technology. Because the barriers for most customers have been kind of diminished. But you're always going to have those customers who want the experience of shopping in a store and interacting with a salesperson. But I think technology or technology aided retail will play a much bigger role.
Yes, absolutely. So, Mary Lynn, what would you like people to take away from our conversation today? We're certainly not done, but I want to ask this last formal question and then open it up again to our participants.
I guess there's two key messages. I mean, and many of you are, most of you are actually, far along in your career. So you have tremendous amount of experience. I would tell you to reach out to your younger professional partners and share your experience, be a mentor, open doors for people who are ambitious and interested in growth, and help them chart their path. As I mentioned, I'm the beneficiary of a strong mentor, and that made such a difference in my career that I believe in giving that back and paying that forward. And I encourage everyone with that the benefit of experience to share that with their younger professional partners. The other thing I would say is, you got to have a passion for what you do. You got to have a passion for the industry you work in, because we spend an awful lot of time working. We all know that we spend an awful lot of time working, and if you don't have that passion, you need to reach out and get it. As I said earlier, there was a period in my recent history where I was out of balance. It's important to have that self-awareness, recognize when you're just not having fun and you're not bringing your best self to the office every day, to step back and say, what do I need to do different? How do I get that passion back into my life, into my work life? And be willing to put yourself out there and do something different. I would say, you're never too experienced to learn something new, and it actually kind of is invigorating and exciting to take on a new challenge. So those would be the two key messages I would say from today.
Absolutely. So reach out to your colleagues to be a mentor and show them the way, and to also be passionate about what you do, and be balance and recognizing when you're out of balance. And I think that there's really a third message in there, and that's about continuous learning and growth, because things are changing all the time, as we know.
Yes, yes.
So a couple of questions have come into the chat. One is around, so I'm an Ernst & Young alum, and there's a few folks who are participating today who are also Ernst & Young alums. And so they were curious about the time frame that you were at Ernst & Young.
Well, that would show my age. So,
So you could feel free not to share.
I'm in the 80s, we'll say.
Okay. In the 80s, Mary Lynn was at Ernst & Young, for those who are curious about that. So there's
if it's fair to say, at the time I was there, it was still Ernst and Winnie. There you go.
Okay, there you go. That gives a little hint. So there's a question from Bob Arnold Jr. about retail trending at more self-service at checkout, and which will continue to increase to the point of eliminating staff checkout lines altogether, as a question. And what advice would you give to service providers trying to sell into the organization at the C level from a retail perspective?
Yeah, so the question about self-checkout, I think that ties into the technology and or so people either choosing to shop online or technology facilitating the retail experience. And the other thing that we noticed in COVID is that our self-checkout usage went up considerably. And anything where people could avoid contact and or keep the time in an enclosed environment to a minimum, they were taking advantage of. So like I said, self-checkout definitely increased during COVID, but it's been a growing trend within the industry. And I don't know how many of you are Stop and Shop customers, but Stop and Shop has always had an eye on technology and technology facilitated shopping. So they've got the Scan It app. I know that when I had young kids, it was a godsend, because I could give my kids that Scan It, and they loved going to the grocery store with me, and they were quiet, right? So, but that's a way to get in and out of the store quickly. So like I said, I think there's a lot of opportunities for technology enabled shopping to make the experience better, faster, and really align with what our customers need and want. So I expect that will continue to grow in different ways, lots of different ways.
Yes. So I'll open it up for more questions if people have additional questions for Mary Lynn. But while we're waiting for questions to come in, Stephanie, can you launch some further questions, polling questions that you have prepared? So it's a question about female leadership at your organization, and if so, what role does that leadership play? And Stephanie, if you want to share those results. So yes, there are female leaders. 44% are CFO, CEO, or COO. That's great. 33% EVPs, senior vice presidents, or presidents. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having shared the results with us. That's great news. So there's part two of Bob's question. I don't know if we got to, if you have any advice for service providers that are trying to engage the C-suite of retail organizations.
I think, similar to getting a foot in the door in any in any capacity, right? It's about networking. If you know someone, it's always great to contact that person. Have a very clear outline of what your product will offer, how it will benefit the organization that you're trying to attract, and help and use that network to get you in the door. That would be my my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you. Other questions from our audience?
I think Tom had something as well. Tom Embry.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it in your customer experience comments before. Thank you, about technologies. But if you wanted to expand, it's personal to me because that's actually my role at Estee is technology finance. So just curious to see if there's any other big trends you're seeing in technology, specific trends that you're willing to share.
Well, I think technology from a customer's perspective, there's a lot of applications out there. Specific, anything that makes the transaction easier. I think are going to continue to have and gain more and more traction. But there's also quite a bit of technology around just creating efficiency in the process or efficiency in the operations. That are also gaining traction, and ways to communicate to customers differently. This is not new, but I think that it's becoming increasingly important is that personalization and localization in how you communicate to your customers. I think that's going to continue to gain a tremendous amount of traction. And again, not new, but I think it is becoming increasingly important, is anything around data analytics, customer analytics. That is hugely important. Most of the young people that I mentor today who are still in school, I tell them, take data analytics classes, become well versed in those tools, and get jobs where you are in that area of the business, because an understanding of that and the ways that you can use data to enhance decision making, enhance the insights that you bring to your business partners, that is becoming increasingly important, and it's a skill set that many organizations, depending upon where they are in the continuum of data analytics and having a data scientist group, it's a hot skill set right now to try to hire for.
So Mary Lynn, there was a question about from Bob Arnold again about using AI or machine learning tools in accounting and finance. Are you seeing that within your world? Can you share some insights into that?
I think it goes back to the forecasting, the future looking. That's where I'm reading about now. We're having conversations about now in terms of what role does that play, and what does that look like as we envision the future of finance. So yes, it is a topic that is top of mind, and AI is being used all across the organizations, both this one as well as the ones that I've been in prior. But and again, it goes back to that data, right? And trying to understand what's the customer's shopping behavior, what's her, trying to anticipate when and why and what will be the trigger that will cause her to shop. It was used much more in my previous life than where I am now, but I think fashion is further along in that customer journey.
Got it. And speaking of customers, one of the things that Dominic was asking about is how has the rise of Instacart and delivery services really impacted the business?
Yeah, so like I said, we have a fairly developed infrastructure around e-commerce delivery, click and pickup in store. But with the explosion, Instacart was one of the ways that we were able to meet the demand of the customer, and so we used it to augment our already existing infrastructure, and it's great, but whenever you enable someone else to take a piece of your business, right, you lose that customer contact. So it's important to have the strategies around how do you maintain contact with that customer, and being able to make sure that they are loyal to your brand, not the Instacart brand. So that's a challenge, but I think there's a lot out there around the gig economy and how it fills the void, and it certainly has been instrumental during COVID.
Absolutely. And there's another question that came up about if you can comment on how retail will compete against bigger club stores. Is there any insights you can share about that? Mary Lynn? Well, it looks like we ran into a technical snag.
We having technical?
Yes. Yes, it looks like your screen froze. I don't know if it's on your side, but we can now hear you. I don't know if you heard my last question about retail competing against club stores and any insights that you could share. Mary Lynn, I don't know if your screen is frozen.
It sounds like she's having some technical difficulties as well.
Yes.
Mary Lynn, if you want to log out and possibly log back in, we'll give that a minute or so. In the interim, while we hopefully wait for Mary Lynn to come back into the call or fix it on her side, I just shared in the chat group for everyone that we have a limited space for our next event, which is going to be held on March 30th at 5 p.m. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is going to be a fun-filled trivia night. So please, bring yourself, bring your spouse, bring your kids. It's supposed to be a fun event. So please go to the link, register as soon as you can. Like I said, there's very limited space for it, and it should hopefully be a lot of fun. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to send me an email regarding it. Mary Lynn, are you back? Can we hear you?
Yes, I am. I wasn't sure
Awesome.
if it was me or if it was you, so I apologize.
No, that's fine. I actually had a question. I'll just ask it since I have the floor right now. I'm myself, and I know a lot of family, friends, and everyone were avid users of the Instacarts, of the Stop and Shop, of the the Fresh Direct, the delivery, the pickup outside, the Stop and Shop locations, and obviously there tends to be sometimes issues with the product that people will call in and say, well, our delivery person got all the wrong stuff, or they bought things that are expiring today or tomorrow, and I bought for the week. And all these companies seem to issue immediate credits and refunds and say, keep the products. How is that financially impacting, your organization? How do you withstand or absorb that type of financial blow, and who's actually eating that loss?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think listen, it's the cost of doing business online is the way I would put it. You want to make sure that your customers have a satisfactory experience, so the like I said, it becomes a cost of doing business, and you kind of you monitor those issues. You try to understand the root cause of them, and you fix them so that they're not an ongoing cost of your business.
Okay. We've been avidly using this stuff. Obviously, we have little kids, 3 and 4 years old. So it's been a couple of years that we use all this stuff. And over the course of a couple of years, we've only had probably 3 times total where it's, we needed milk for the week, and it came where it would be finished by tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, if you multiply out that by, the millions of people using all the different, resources in the country for the delivery model, I was just always curious, because the 3 times we called in, I just remember, they were $175, $225 orders, and they'd say, all right, well, for inconvenience, we're just going to credit the whole thing back. My mind would be baffled.
Yeah, and like I said, we keep track of how often it happens and where and when it happens, so that we can identify the root cause and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. But
awesome.
There is a human element to all of this.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll kick it back over to you, Susan. I know we had one more question to try and cover, or if anything else comes in.
Let's see. Oh, there's a question that Marjorie Spitz just asked as a follow-up to Benji's about how do you quality control the Instacart and other call it shoppers on behalf of others.
We have service level agreements like you would with any service provider. But the Instacart's business is their business. They just they shop in our stores, right? So that's it's a little bit of the risk of having your brand delivered by others. So it's why we would prefer to deliver it ourselves.
Understood. Thank you for giving us that insights. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Can I just I'm going to build on that, right?
Yeah.
It's also a little bit, and I'm going to go back to when I was in fashion. It's a little bit like entrusting your brand, Stuart Weitzman, Eileen Fisher, to be sold at Macy's, right? You're never 100% confident that they're going to set up the shoe, the collection
Display.
the way that you wanted them to. You're never 100% sure they're going to sell it at the price that you suggest. And there were often times when I was at Stuart Weitzman in particular, where we would look at Macy's website, for example, and see that they were selling our current season shoes on sale. It got wrapped up into one of their, one-day sales, right? And so, like I said, whenever you are relying upon somebody else to deliver your brand, you run that risk. And it's why it's why knowing who your customer is, being able to communicate directly to your customer, and ensuring that customer comes to your store where you're delivering your brand and you have more control over that is important. It's why you see over the last 5 to 10 years, you saw a lot of fashion brands who were reliant upon delivery through department stores started to create their own websites for that purpose, right? Because they wanted to manage the customer experience.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you for
it's an issue. Yeah.
that insight.
Yeah.
And thanks, Marjorie, for that question.
Yeah, and just to give the, we didn't mention, but Peapod is the Stop and Shop product, right? Correct? Peapod is Stop and
Yes,
Shop?
it is. It is no longer Peapod, right? It is Stop and Shop.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was just going to add too, it's just such a challenge, right? Because, you have somebody picking up produce or whatever for you. And if it's a bad experience, you probably, Stop and Shop has to do the refund, not necessarily the person picking out the produce or whatever. So I could see how it could be a real challenge going forward.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions that anyone wants to ask via messaging? Is there anything else that we need to cover, Susan?
I think we covered it all. I really wanted to thank Mary Lynn for her time, for her insights, just being very generous with sharing her journey with us. And I hope that people walk away with some takeaways and inspired and finding out how they can incorporate some of what Mary Lynn has shared into their either own professional journey or to their particular role in finance. And Stephanie Hummel is asking if we could complete the survey that you're going to get via email. So that will help with future programming. So thanks again, Mary Lynn.
Yeah. And
thank you, Susan. And if I could just say thank you to everyone. The questions were terrific, and I appreciate your interest in my journey and in my in what I had to say. So I thank you for the invitation. It was great.
Yeah, so I want to thank you both on behalf of the chapter. We are humbled to have both of you on here. Susan, thank you so much for moderating and putting this together for our chapter. And Mary Lynn, again, truly thank you so much for being an inspiration to so many and achieving what you have with your organization and your journey in your career. So thank you so much. I did want to, again, just reiterate in conclusion that please, I did share it. It's the registration link for our March 30th event. Seating for it is very limited. Please do come. I did post this onto LinkedIn, so please feel free to like, comment, put anything on there that you would like to share with anybody. And I think with that being said, I think we're good. I don't think we have any more polling to ask, and I think we're good to go. All right.
Thank you. Thanks
You
so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.